That was one of the things when I was growing up as a Jehovah's Witness and going from door to door. And actually, like, if every like once in like 7 years someone would actually answer the door and like have a conversation, it was like, oh, junk. And as I got older, it wasn't about like, hey, you want to take this watchtower, me talking at them. It was me having a conversation with them. So it was
Mm.
more like, well, we don't believe that. I'm like, oh, I'm interested. Like, okay, well, my Bible says this, and this is my thought and belief around it. Like, what is yours saying? What's your belief around it? And it wasn't confrontational. It was more for an understanding. So even it wasn't about me trying to convert, right? And I think that's the piece where religion can be very slippery when the ego can come into play. And now instead of listening and hearing you and come from that place of we are all one, we may
Yeah.
say the language may be different. I could come from a place of like I'm trying to convince you or I'm trying to convict you because or convince you to come to my side, or I'm looking to convict you because you're failing, you're resistant to come to my side. Oh, it is what it is. What's up, everybody? Yeah, buddy. Oh, Junk, look at these faces. Look at these faces that we got here, everyone. Oh, yeah, look at that. Oh, buddy, we got our newly married guy co-host Brian. What up, B?
Woo. I
Newly
keep,
married? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Friday, yeah. Yeah.
When?
This ring is annoying though, man. I already
Oh,
left it at home once. I got the lecture, so
Yeah,
right,
you
right.
had to take
I'm
that
working
junk
though.
off,
Yeah.
man. Be like, shoop, shoop, shoop.
Yeah.
Welcome, B.
Yeah.
Congrats, bro.
Yeah.
Congrats, man.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Locked
And
down for life.
yes, indeed, man. You know you happy as hell, bro. So you get
All good.
Yo, listen, I'm so happy for you, brother. I'm so happy for you, man. We're gonna get back to that. We're gonna do an episode on something that came up for me about love, which I thought was so beautiful and powerful. And party people, listen, welcome to this More Than Black and White podcast. You know it's your host, Paul and Brian, and we got our special guest coming back for a second time. Numero dos.
Yay. I'm so
Bless up,
excited.
man.
We had so much
Welcome.
fun last time, right?
Yes, yes. Listen, that's yo, B and I were like, yo, that junk was freaking tight. And listen, the word, the you, the people spoke because from the amount of views, the amount of feedback that we got, it was beautiful. So, Carolyn, thank you for your time and your attention and your wisdom, your insight that you provided in the first podcast that you did with us. We brought this junk, but we were like, zoop, 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 bring this back. And the Jamaican culture, they'd be like, rewind. You requested it, so we rewind. So listen, man, we this. So everyone, this topic, I want to put the disclaimer out there. The topic that we're going into today is free of making anyone right or wrong. We're going into this topic today because we've all had experiences of it or with both sides of it, and we thought it was going to be helpful for the collective, for us to talk about spirituality versus religion. Okay, spirituality versus religion. Now, listen, I want you to just pay attention and breathe because your butt cheeks may clench up a little bit. I know mine did when I started thinking about this topic and talking about it in public. All right, so breathe, let your sphincter go, breathe down into your belly basin. And we're going to talk about this again. The disclaimer is that this is free of making anyone right or wrong. It's just more about speaking about our experiences and what we found, and some things that we've noticed that are similarities and differences. So here's how we're going to kick this off. All right. So I'd like for us all to share our religious background. Okay.
Mhm.
And we'll give a summary of it. And for those that are watching, you can hit the like button. There's also a thing that you can comment. So comment and put in what's your religious origin, right? So I think that'll be great to hear. I'll kick it off. Paul, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. So yeah, I was probably knocking on your door with a watchtower awake if you lived in Union County between the times of 1980. But regardless, so I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, very strict household. My mom primarily was the main driver of it. The background is we were in church all the time. So we had Sunday church like most people, and then we had a theocratic. We had a study group on Tuesdays, and then we had a theocratic ministry school on Thursdays, and then we had something called field service where we go back up to people's doors, like most people joke about in movies and TV shows. Um, it was a very looking back on it, I'm happy I grew up as it, and also I'm working through the wounds I personally experienced in my situation as Jehovah's Witness, which I saw as like some hypocrisy, some more on my part. I didn't want to like I got out of it when I was 18 because I went to my mom and I was like, I can't do this because I'm weed smoking, drinking, fornicator. I'm like, I can't do this to you, mama. No. So I left and I learned a lot about presenting. I learned a lot about discussions. I learned a lot about the Bible. And it also gave me the way of seeing the Bible in a way that was different because my dad, when my parents were going through the divorce, he was bringing me to church too. So I was going to church on Sundays when I was with him. And I was like, I went the range from like, the Mormon to Catholic to Baptist to like scientist. I experienced everything, bro. So this shit was like, I think I'm like on a religious trauma detox. So that's my background for now, and I'll shut up. And then Carolyn will go you, and then Brian will go with you.
Yeah, so I was raised Catholic by two very devout Catholics, went to Catholic school all my life. But I will say that religion never made sense to me. I remember at 8 years old, you get your first sacrament, reconciliation, and it made no sense to me. So I came in with questions. So I was like, why do I have to tell this man that I'm sorry? Like, doesn't only God know? And I know that was frustrating to my parents. I in Catholic high school had questions about religion. I ended up getting kicked out of class one time for asking, like, how do we know we're right?
Mm,
And I did end up going to a Jesuit university, so I had to take theology and philosophy as a college student. But the Jesuits are really smart, so you were allowed to question, right? You were allowed to
mm,
question, and so I appreciated those conversations. But I didn't continue with, going to church or with any sort of religion, although I did have a faith in a higher power. Um, until I had kids, and there was a lot of pressure for them to be baptized and to be raised with some sort of faith. I didn't love the Catholic Church though, so we did a little bit of exploring different Christian religions, which did not go over well with my family at all. It was like a Protestant. So that created some stir in my family, and then ultimately I didn't go to church at all, and then ended up in this new age, because I was seeking deeper meaning. We talked about dark night of the soul last time.
mm.
Ended up finding my own relationship with the higher power, who for me I call God. Like, whatever, sometimes I call it God, sometimes I call it source, sometimes infinite wisdom, divine love, whatever.
Depends on the day.
Found that. What's that?
Depends on the day.
Depends on the day. But I found source through energy healing, because there is this very powerful source. But I will say that over the course of the last couple of years, I've had some pretty profound experiences with Christ, like very profound experiences with Christ that have sort of
Like
brought
what?
me
What do you
back
mean?
around.
What? Can you give an example of like what's one a profound experience?
Yeah. Well, let's see, pick one. I went to, yeah, I mean,
Meeny,
I mean,
meeny,
I'm
miny,
talking
mo.
profound, Paul, profound.
Oh, okay.
We were in Sedona. We went out to Sedona to meditate, do the energy vortices. I think that's the plural. And we
Mhm.
ended up in the Chapel of Holy Cross, which is this chapel that's built into the side of a mountain. It's amazing. And there's this
Mm.
massive crucifix there, massive. And Christ's eyes are wide open, and you can sit there and just sort of pray. And at the foot of the crucifix are these copper footprints that are supposed to represent his footprints, where you can stand in his footprints. So I sat, and we're energetics, right?
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
sat in the chapel, and I'm looking up at this massive crucifix, and he's staring down at me, and I feel my heart going like this, and I feel it being pulled. And I felt like I was just being pulled towards the crucifix, and my heart was just expanding. And then I heard Christ say, "This is where I live." And so much of the work that I've done in spiritual
Wow.
circles, in healing, in, let's say, even a lot of the Buddhist practices of coming to terms with our oneness, right? Coming to terms with loving kindness. These are things we practice. Compassion, loving kindness, not judgment, oneness. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the same thing. This Christ consciousness, or this heart of Christ, this forgiveness, like love one another. I was like, it's the same thing. And so it brought me back to my original, to the roots of the original teachings. Like, so what's at the core of Christianity, right? Are these teachings? It's like, what have people done with those teachings? That's the problem. So I ended up remembering that in my bedroom growing up, there was a crucifix in my bedroom, and there were these two statues, one of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and one of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And as a child, they scared me because I could feel the energy of them. They were real to me. I didn't know that it then, that I felt that, but they were scary to me. And so in that chapel, I came to understand that as a child, I felt them, but that nobody could help me understand them. Like they were teaching me things through my brain, but not helping me to understand where this compassion and forgiveness and your love just because you are-ness existed in my heart. And I think at a young age I understood that, but no one was helping me with that.
Yeah, it's like you understood it, but you're like, what the heck is this?
But it's like it wasn't making sense in my brain,
Yeah.
but I understood it, but it wasn't comfortable for me because it was so big. It was too big for me to hold.
Wow.
But in that chapel, it all made sense. And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt this as a child. I didn't understand it. No one knew how to present this to me. But the very thing that I've been practicing and teaching all along in terms of loving kindness and compassion and forgiveness, as well as this idea that, we're loved just because we are, was the same thing they were trying to teach me all along, but I just didn't get it in their way or in their language. So it was this full circle that kind of started a journey that led to some other experiences. One of them being where literally the voice of God, and this is very vulnerable to speak like publicly.
Yeah,
I woke up
you're
at
doing
midnight.
great. You're doing
I
great.
woke up at midnight one night. And by the way, this is after doing a kirtan, right?
Oh shoot.
Right.
Oh,
So I do.
wait. For people that have the like, what's she talking about a kirtan?
Yeah.
Basically, like you're in a space, you play some instruments and you chant, and the energy is tangible. Like you're
Tangible.
like,
So make a
what?
kirtan.
Yeah.
And they're doing this chant called the Hanuman Chalisa. And it's a very long chant. Hanuman in the Hindu religion is like the monkey god, right? But I'm so mildly uncomfortable with this because my background is Christian. So I'm like, oh, this is a god. But Krishna Das says Hanuman was the breath of God. And there was something about those words that made me go, okay, listen to this. And it's in Sanskrit, so I don't know. I don't know what language, Sanskrit. And it just moved me. It moved me. Well, the next day, I wake up at midnight and I think it's morning. So I look at the clock thinking it's 5 a.m. and it's midnight. And the voice says to me, get in the shower. And I got in the shower and I was in there for an hour. What felt like 15 minutes was an hour, having flashbacks of all these moments in my life where I needed to forgive someone, but also moments in my life where I was forgiven and I needed to be compassionate towards myself. And I felt these warm hands on my back, which were Christ. And I'm intuitive. So I'm like, okay, Jesus has his warm hands on my back as I'm going through this forgiveness, absolution, cleansing. I don't even know how to describe it. I get out and it was literally an hour had passed. And I hear the voice say, go open a Bible. And I've never read the Bible in my life. Like a lot of Catholics don't really read the Bible. Like we're just taught how to pray. And I opened the Bible to the book of Lamentations, which I didn't even know was a book. And it's just like, basically, you are cleared, you are forgiven, like all these things. But then also, okay, now that that's in the past, you're going to move mountains. And so ever since then, I've had this personal relationship with Christ. Then I've always had my personal relationship with God, which deepened in my spiritual practices because I've seen what we can do as healers. But since the chapel, I've had this series of events that brought me as well to this Christ consciousness. And even in the spiritual community, you hear people talking about this Christ consciousness, right? Because what his teachings were just love and oneness.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, we're all talking about love and oneness, but we're arguing because we speak a different language or we had a different entry door,
Mhm.
right? And we're trying to be right. And isn't that what we teach in our spirituality practices? It's
Yeah,
like we need to move beyond the black and white and the
right.
right and wrong and get into this space of understanding and recognize that we're one, right? So
Yeah.
my
So wait. So yeah, because you man, this is gonna be really good. I'm hearing. I want to hear more about this,
yeah,
and
I
this
don't
is
want to hog
starting to
it.
go. Huh?
I don't want to hog the space.
Hey,
Somebody else.
listen. No, this
Great.
is
You
just
keep
like
going.
just hold on, because I want to hold on for a second because you're coming to something really important here, right? And I want to call this because I want you to just remember and write it down, CA, because I want us to come back to this. I want to hear Brian's perspective. What I'm hearing is you had the vibe in the beginning. You went through different spaces, different religions, and all these things, and you came back with a different awareness of that energy.
Of the original energy of love and oneness, not only oneness with one another, but
Right.
oneness with source.
Yes.
So
Okay.
my entire
Yes.
life brought me on this journey
Right.
through different things, through the yogic practice, through Reiki, which is totally non-denominational, through Buddhism, and back to Christ to
Mm-hmm.
realize that we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Can
yeah,
we get
yeah,
on the same
yes.
page? Because we're all talking about the same thing.
This is
If
true.
we're coming to it from the place of embodied wisdom and heart centered or open heartedness, right? I think if we're
Yes.
coming to it from our brain, then we're black and white, right and wrong. And that's the polarizing thing,
Well, we're
right?
gonna get there. We're gonna
Yeah.
because there's a lot that you put. There's a lot that you. There's a lot. There's a lot we're gonna dive back into because you're hitting on some points, and I want to make sure that we lay some things out. The reason being is, and B, I want you to get ready to go next.
Yeah.
The reason being is because you're making a lot of connections between the spiritual and religious that in our society there's usually a conflict of spiritual or religious
Correct.
when it's really both end.
Both end. Yes.
Yes.
Both end.
So yeah, oh God, oh, I'm excited. But hold on, B, I want to hear your background, man.
Yeah.
Tell us
I
about
want
like
to
your
hear
religious
Brian too.
background, bro.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. Like, so my parents got divorced when I was 7. So we used to spend like a week over my dad's, a week at my mom's. And my mom was not religious at all. She's like, do whatever makes you happy. Don't get in trouble kind of person. And that was it. My dad, on the other hand, was raised Catholic from straight off the boat from Germany. So he had a Catholic background and he was super strict. And so we used to have to go to church all the time. So my dad's background a little bit he was a bad alcoholic, really like abusive, but he gave a lot of money to the churches. So a lot of the priests were like, "Oh, your dad's a good man." I remember being like 8, 9 years old. I'm like, "No, my dad's an asshole." Like, so they didn't get it. And it was like, for me, it was like, that was like a really big turnoff there.
Mm.
Another thing is like when I used to go to CCD, which I actually wound up
Oh my
getting kicked
God,
out of
CCD.
Yeah,
Oh, I
CCD. I
know.
wound up actually getting kicked out of CCD or getting picked up early a couple times with my dad because I just asked like so many questions, like so many things that like did not make sense to me. Like I was trying to ask questions about like heaven and hell. I'm like, wait, so if you're bad, you're gonna burn for the rest of your life in hell? And the priest and all the teachers are like, yeah, I know, so you got to do this. They're almost like putting the fear in you, like Noah's Ark. I'm like, so like 2 polar bears of the opposite sex, they swam from like the Antarctic all the way up to the Middle East and got on this boat, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And so I noticed quickly that my teachers did engage me philosophically, they engaged me authoritatively, almost like shut your mouth, don't ask any questions. And I was very like put off at that point. And I was like, you know what? This isn't working out for me.
Mm,
So as I got older, I kind of like didn't have any like paying attention to like religion or spirituality. I kind of did my own thing. Then as I started getting into my mid 20s, I started getting like some calling, some like voices that were kind of popping up and like weird things. I remember like, for one example, like I'm laying in bed with my girlfriend at the time. Must have been like 28 and I had a club in Hoboken and I had, money in the bank and everything. And all of a sudden, like I heard this voice, like everything is going to be okay. And I woke up like, I was like, what'd you say? She's like, I didn't say anything. I was, I was sleeping. What do you want? And I'm like, that was weird. Next day I go into my job, I wound up getting let go because we had a company, wound up losing the gym, losing my apartment within like everything within like a month or two. Moving back home, sleeping in my mom's dining room on a mattress. But like I remember like it set me up and I was okay with it because like I'm like, came from a way higher source, what I heard this. So it always rang me. I'm like, I never got down on myself. I'm like, all right, this is just something that's gonna, I gotta take it on the chin for a couple of weeks, but I know something bigger has my back. Just stay positive, stay focused, and kind of go into it. And that really got me into spirituality. And I think what kind of triggered this whole religious versus spirituality is the last conversation that we had. Remember, yeah, I was because went through Paul Check and we talked about rehab. And he's like, well, you need to know if you're working on somebody's back, you need to know if it was a Jewish back, a Catholic back, a Christian back, an Islamic back, because all that root chakra, all their religion is mostly stored in that root chakra. So he's like, if you really want to communicate with somebody's soul and you want to help somebody, you need to get on their level, or not on your level. You need to become very spiritual where you have nothing but love. You're not judging anything. And I remember he always said, become spiritual first, then become religious, if that's what you want to do. And that always kind of stuck to me. So I went down like a path of studying numerous religions and philosophies. I mean, I'm in no way I'm an expert in any of them, but I just took what I needed to kind of help me understand and hopefully pass on some knowledge to my clients. But I am not a religious person at all. I'm more like a more spiritual. I don't judge anybody. Like I was telling you before in the pregame, like my wife, she's Christian, and believes in all God. She goes to church, and she's one of the best people I know. Her family's absolutely amazing. I just might have had like a bad foundation to start with from an abusive parent and like priests that were just assholes, So that's what kind of maybe skewed me a little bit. But I always stuck on this on this spiritual path it worked best for me.
Man, damn, thank you for that. Thank you both for that. Oh, man, I'm hearing so many there's similarities for each one of us. And some of the things that really stick out, we are all questioners. We're all like, I heard in both of your stories, from a young age, we're all like, so wait a second. So what? Like for me, the big question, I was like, when I was a kid, I was like, yo, hold up. Cause I got caught with, well, I didn't get caught jerking off, but like I got caught with Playboys and shit when I was a kid. And then they got brought to church. And then my mom was like, I can't believe he know he's masturbating. Oh my God. And the religion was like, the elder was like, Paul, this isn't something we do as Christian folks. I was like, well, was Jesus ever 13? Because I never saw that dude in the Bible at 13, man. It was when he was 9 years old, and then he was 32. Where was he? I know he was jerking off. He's a man, right? Like, and they were like, and that's like the first time that I really started to jab back at religion, because I was just like, yo, some of this stuff just doesn't make sense. And I'm hearing that in both of you two. And I think it's really interesting because, especially coming from a place of non-judgment, I had to go through, like, I don't want to say the ringer, but I had to go through what each of us experiences, like we talked about last time, that dark night of the soul. That stuff that's like, oh, like, Sia, you said the energy work really brought the soul out of it. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, so that thing for about, then B, when you were talking about like everything was like, hey man, life is good, and then something was like, it's gonna be okay before the freaking shoe dropped. That spirit. And it's interesting because like I'm a word nerd, man. So I'm like, I'm just looking up things. So I want to share this because I want to share the definitions, which I think is worthwhile sharing, right? Because let's get into, and can you all see that? Can you see religion?
Yeah.
So religion, the belief in unworship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a god or group. One of the things that I think is interesting is that we all believe in a higher power. And it's so funny to see that even in the religion, I always found that something, Brian, you said was similar, was like, oh man, like my dad was an alcoholic, but they said he was a good guy. Like, yo, I'm something's that's not right here. And I used to see people that would do things in the church, and I'd be like, yo, you getting lauded, but you fornicate.
Yeah.
So this can be like
And what's
uh
interesting, what you're saying is like if you read like, like Buddha was never a Buddhist, Jesus was never a Christian, we made these religions based around their, I believe in from what I meditate on or what I hear from other people, Jesus was very spiritual and they made his practices a religion,
yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it
So
well,
like,
so yeah, it's
religion is
interesting.
more like man-made almost.
Right, right. It's so I got to check in on this distinction. I'm gonna stop sharing it for a second because what keeps coming up is we say religious, we could say Jesus, yet I find that spiritual people say Christ. Do you guys do you have you do you guys catch that at all?
Yeah,
Um,
no, yeah. I've
I
heard
don't know
that.
how to make that distinction. Yeah.
I want you to pay attention to it because I think
Well,
it was
Christ is a title, from what my understanding. It's a title meaning like king. I think it is. It's not. It was actually it wasn't his name. It was just the title given to him.
so, and this is where again sometimes
Yeah,
religious um can have a lot of stories. I can see religion as telephone, right? It's
we
like,
had
well,
this
these
conversation a couple weeks ago. Remember, Paul? It's like this. We did research. There's literally over 30,000 sects of Christianity.
yes,
So if literally 30,000 sects of Christianity. So imagine like Paul, you pass away and somebody, and all of a sudden you come back, say, 2,000 years later, and there's 30,000 different books about you. You'd
yeah,
be like, these people didn't understand me.
you didn't know
Like
me,
they didn't know who I was.
right?
The
So, and
problem. It's
that's
like a big game of telephone that creates a lot of sects, creates a lot of books.
right. Well, see, okay, so how I see it is like the religious piece, right? That's like the telephone thing because there's a whole bunch of offshoots. Coming back to something Carol Ann said when you were checking in about Christ, and
Mhm.
something I learned as I was going into the spirit is Christ consciousness, which is that oneness, that all that Carol Ann that you were talking about, right? Which so I'm curious for you to like and B, I'm gonna start there. I'm gonna have you go, Carol Ann, is like what would be like so I guess the best way I could ask this, right, is when you were going through exploring like the higher power, the connection to higher power, what was the part of your journey that had you settle into that spiritual piece of things?
By spiritual, you mean the relationship with the source.
Yeah, let me get clear.
Okay.
Relationship with a source. Let's
Mhm.
call it that. Thank you for that
Right.
distinction.
Okay.
Right. Um, B, let me hear from you first. Then see, I want you to rock. I want you to rock with it.
Yeah, I mean, like you mean I kind of start off with this, like you see this in a lot of like Abrahamic religions, right? Your Islamic, Christianity, your Judaism, they have this external God, this apocalyptic with apocalyptic concepts. But when you get to Eastern philosophies, you get a much different approach because God is within, right? So, for example, like studied a little bit of like Hinduism. So you get like the Vedas. They say
Mhm.
Brahman is Atman, Atman is Brahma, which means God is your soul, and your soul is God. So there is no way to, there's nowhere you have to drive to experience God. You don't got to go to a church. You don't have to have a membership. You don't got to pay or anything like that. You
Mhm.
just kind of hold still, be quiet the mind, and there he is.
Yeah. And B,
So
well, hold on before you go on. Like, what's tripping me up is when you said an apocalyptic God.
like the world's coming to an end. Jesus is coming
Ah, okay.
down.
That's what I
Kind
figured.
of,
Okay.
like
Okay,
that.
got you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like doom and gloom. Like you better
Yeah.
obey me. I'll bring the
Yeah.
Beatles. Yeah, I'll bring. Yeah, yep,
And this
yeah.
is this is one of the key distinctions of a monotheistic religions is because they push God outside and they separate it from the rest of life. Where it's like you have to
Mm,
die to get to God, or you have to go somewhere to experience God, like a church. But again,
mm,
if you look deeply enough into yourself, or you study enough spiritual philosophy from around the world, it kind of becomes clear what God actually means. And I really got like a good definition of it, not a word definition more, but more like a feeling when I started diving into plant medicines. And you realize the monotheistic God doesn't exist. It's more polytheistic. There's God everywhere. There's God in our. So if you look, for example, like in Terence McKenna's book, where he talks about the food of gods, he's like, you got to
Oh,
get back. Yeah. He talked about how plant medicine was used to remind us not to get kind of like stuck in our egos. And everything is, and basically he's like, stay close to earth, connect with each other. But now we have this like patriarchal God religion where God is somewhere else and the earth is just some kind of like way station where we can do whatever the hell we want with it and just destroy it. So they talk about back in the days, you used the plant medicines from shamans, and now you have this polytheistic God where you realize God is in the sun, the God is in the soil, the God is in the animals, the water, the trees. It's everywhere. It's not one place.
Yeah, man.
So when I started diving into plant medicines, that became crystal clear to me that it doesn't exist in one spot. It's all around us if you're spiritually awake. That's so basically plant medicines got me there.
Bless up, man. Because you and I can share some stories. I think we need to do an episode specifically on plant medicine and spirituality, because I think I'll come back to it after I hear from UCA. But I want to come back to that piece about the plant medicine and that awakening. CA, what was it for you?
I think that I've always, as I said, had a personal relationship with God. My parents, in retrospect, from this view now, I can look to see that they both experienced very young. My parents got married at 16. They both experienced very young situations and hardships where they had no idea how they would get through, and they just like surrendered and themselves to a higher power, and they were somehow lifted through. Like when I look and see the fact that these kids raised 5 of us, all college graduates, no one ever got in trouble, and somehow we all went to Catholic school or whatever, and somehow they were always provided for. I really do believe it was their faith. And I look at it almost like law of attraction. Like I was raised with the belief that you would always be provided for. And so I believe that kind of faith in a higher power was deeply embedded in me from childhood. And I've always lived that. It'll work out. God will take care of it. God will take care of it. And so I think that personal relationship with God was always there. And my parents were truly examples of that kind of faith. And when you look at their life, it was sort of evidence of that. And I had a similar experience, Brian. Go ahead.
Well, I'm curious because like when you were talking about your parents and having kids at a young age, like the sense I got was that like almost like they had to rely on God. Whereas
100%.
Whereas the sense I got when you checked in of your experience coming into it is like, I want to connect with God.
Well, I think that I had to come, like, this is where the dark night of the soul, I think, is impactful. I think that truly to have that personal knowing of the higher power, many times we have to be brought to our knees where nothing of our own understanding or doing is working, and we surrender to something bigger than ourselves and we're lifted. So similar to what Brian was saying, like I had a period of time where I was going through the darkest of darkest times in my life, and I had the experience of being held in a massive hand and just being safe. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be okay. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I know I'm going to be okay. But I already had a belief in God that I now realize was deeply established by my parents, and they truly were an example of that. I did not, though, have what I'll call a casual relationship. So growing up Catholic, it was like you say the Our Father, you say the Hail Mary, you say these prayers. And I remember my first job when I moved to New Jersey, not my first job, but after I had kids, I was working for born again Christians, and we would pray before every staff meeting, and they'd be like, Father God, like, bless us today when we eat and help us, be good in our work. And they were having conversations with God. And I remember being like uncomfortable because it felt like the way you feel like if you were going to call your friend's parent by their first name. And I'm like, why are they talking to God like this? And I was like, oh my gosh, they have a personal relationship. And so what I developed through my hardships was a personal relationship to God, where I could bring something to the God of my understanding, source. And then through meditation or stillness, I would hear answers. I would hear guidance. I would get clarity. And then when, my energy healing practice began because a miracle happened through me. I know you know that story, right? Like my hands got warm and this guy's facial paralysis opened, and that was a miracle. It didn't happen from me. It happened through me. And I really believe God, source, tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is where you're supposed to be. And through that work, I came to understand that we all have this massive capacity to heal because we're connected to a source that is so limitless and powerful and abundant and wise. And, you name it. Doesn't matter what you call it. You just can't deny that something greater than us exists like that, right?
Yeah.
So I developed this deep knowing of our oneness with each other, but also our oneness with something bigger than ourselves. It was what happened in the last couple of years was this understanding of this Christ consciousness. And for me, where that brought me was, you talked about the Old Testament, the apocalyptic Old Testament versus the New Testament. When I was brought back to the Bible to look at that through this lens of metaphysics or this lens of spirituality and oneness, we literally went from a works-based system where your salvation was earned. You do this, 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 and this, and you earn your salvation. And if not, look out. To you are loved just because you are. You are one in being with the Creator. If you have faith, you can do anything. You can move mountains, you can walk on water, you can do all the things that I do, which I personalized because healing was happening through me. Like after Christ died, the apostles continued healing in his name, right? And so when I read that, I was like, that transcended. It was a new thing where we're like, you know what, you don't have to earn it. You're already loved, but you have to be heart-centered. You have to be non-judgmental. You want to be compassionate and live from the space of the heart and believe that you'll be provided for. And if you are, all things are possible. And when I read that, I was like, that's what they're talking about in quantum physics. That's what they're talking about in the law of attraction. That's what they're talking about. They're literally saying that. And when I look at it through that lens, I'm like, Christ was literally the ultimate metaphysician. He was the ultimate metaphysician. He said, if you live this way and you believe, like faith without evidence, just faith, any and all things can happen. You can even transcend death. And when I look at it through that lens, I'm like, this is the same stuff we're teaching, right? So
it's all the mystery school, man.
It's like just mysticism, right? And when you even look at like one in being with the Creator, it's like that's the oneness. But I don't think that, I mean, you raise a great point about questioning, right? Many of us are just like, we take it, and I think we're taking it from people that don't fully understand the energetics of it either.
Yeah, so this is interesting, right? Because I think there's stages. Because what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that while you've had this constant connection with God, there's been a deepening and or almost like, I don't want to say deepening. I want to say almost like an enriching. Like I see over the years, even though you've had the connection, it's like you're this tree. And then as you started growing and experiencing these miracles, all of a sudden your roots got deeper, your trunk got wider, and then you're really connected because you're the all. It's like the tree of life. You know what I'm saying?
Honestly, I think the heart got broader. I think I had the roots and the branches, but I think the heart got broader. That was the Christ piece.
So what do you think?
Tied everything in almost.
Yeah, it tied everything in, right?
It tied everything in. I feel like on my own journey, and we talked about this last time, you get to a point where, there's peace and there's oneness and there's loving kindness. But you get to a point, if you really want to transcend and be free, You need such a radical self-honesty, accountability. I see you talking about this now in your own place. No one's coming to save you. You
Yeah.
have to go in and be honest. You have to be accountable. You have to look at your life and realize you're the only one that can change things. And it's hard, right? And there's a level of, I'm going to use the word repentance for lack of anything else, where you have to be so honest and forgiving toward yourself. And when
Yeah.
I got to that place where I looked at myself from this lens of accountability, it's no one else's fault. It's not my ex-husband. It's not my parents. It's not anybody else's fault. My inner world has created this reality. My choices, my habits, my patterns, my thoughts, belief have created my own reality.
Mhm.
There was a level of self-forgiveness that was necessary. There was a level of
Okay.
honesty and looking at my life through a lens of repentance that I didn't realize brought me to this Christ piece that made no sense to me growing up.
You had to
So
go
And I'm
on the
not
what they
saying
call
I'm
the
right or
hero.
wrong. This is
You had to
my
go, yeah, you had to go on the hero's journey. You came
yeah,
yeah.
across a crisis and you had to go on a hero's journey.
The hero's
that's what it
journey brought me
is.
to Christ.
Yeah, listen. So this is what's so fascinating as I'm listening to this, right? Because I'm digging the forgiveness piece because it took me a level of forgiveness to forgive myself for the anger and hatred I had towards religion and like my
Mm-hmm.
judgments towards people that I perceived as they're too religious. Oh, I used to like. I remember I used to joke around like in my I think it was like my mid 20s. I was like, I used to make like a game of like talking to religious women because I was like, they're the biggest freaks because I was like, they're hypocrites. Most of the time it was right, but I developed this like thing. I'm gonna prove you wrong, and I'm just gonna try to ding you and do all these things to like discredit you. And in my forgiveness, I recognize that people that experience religion came to the same place that I've come to when I experienced spirituality.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about like when we're talking about this, I think, and it just came to me right now. I'm like, damn, everyone is gonna have that sport, and probably people watching, you're gonna have that time too, where you're like, oh my god, I just I need to you as you mentioned get to come to my knees.
Yeah.
Some people think like when I come to my knees, I'm coming to prayer. Like, and I was smiling when you were talking because it kept bringing me back to when my dad took me to a Baptist church, and you're like, yo, Christ has all knees. And I remember catch them being like, I caught the Holy Ghost. And they started doing a two-step across the stage. Yo, that shit was so
Yeah.
fresh. But I just remember, I was like, damn, I can remember people like just losing themselves. Like very similar as I'm talking about it, very similar to when I went on a plant journey
Mm-hmm.
and I just let go of my ego and I surrendered. And I think that's a difference between the religion and the spirit. Sometimes when people come to their knees, they need the structure, which I see as religion, where
Mm-hmm.
it has these set principles, it has these set concepts. Then then there's some people that are like, I just need to find myself.
Yeah.
Like they come to their knees and they're like, the way I've been living no longer works for me, right? So the thing that I want to ask you to, or your thoughts on, is do you think there's a possibility that the structure of religion creates the space for spirituality to flourish?
Yeah, I agree. You want to start, Caroline?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually interesting because I have circled back because one of my kids has recently started going to church and has found Christ. And so I started going back to church with him and found community there. And there's something really special about that community. And I feel like there's, I, I can be spiritual in that space and get a lot out of it,
Right.
right? Because I can make it my own and I can engage from a different place of understanding. Whereas growing
Mhm.
up, it was this is just what you do and it has to be this way. And
Right.
there was no room for me to think. There was no room for me to have a personal relationship, right?
Yes.
So I feel like I'm so different that I think that within a religious community, you can be deeply spiritual and have a profound experience. But
Mhm.
it all comes down to what's your personal relationship with it. And I think that's what makes it spirituality is like your own personal relationship with the higher power or whatever that is to you, right? And I think there are people within religion that have that are deeply spiritual with personal relationships that function within religion. And I think there's a lot of people that are just going there because they've been told they have to, and they have no personal relationship with, with a higher power. They just do
Mm,
what they're told. So I think that
yeah.
questioning thing is a big thing too. By
Yeah,
the way, I'm trying to log in on my phone because my computer's about to die.
oh, no worries. So I want to check in on something too, Carolyn. And check if you're complete before Brian goes.
Mhm.
Like, did you find, especially as a yoga instructor? Hold on, I'm gonna admit you
Oh,
here.
I love this conversation. So,
Um, okay. Oh, check that pic out. Okay, I see you with the fresh
that's
frames. CA.
funny.
Okay,
But I'm logging out
okay.
here, and
All
I'll put
right.
myself on over here.
All
Hold
right.
on.
All right, good.
Let me get out of
I
here.
love frames, man. So listen, people watching, like, if you got a good pair of frames, best believe I am going to be complimenting or commenting on them. Haha.
That's funny.
Yes,
All right.
indeed. We have
Oh,
yet to
it
see
won't
your
let me
live
access
face.
my camera. Hold
Oh,
on.
really? Okay.
All right.
Um,
Settings.
so yeah, so CA, while you're coming on, we'll come back to the yoga question because I want to, you know what I'm gonna ask.
Yeah,
Uh,
why won't it let me share my camera? What the
I don't know.
hell?
Hold on. Let's see.
Let's see. Settings. Let me go to settings on my phone. I'm so sorry. I asked my
That's
son
okay.
to
I
bring me
remember
my
last
charger.
time I'm the one that had the technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties,
Now,
Now
right?
I
you
guess if
have
we
it.
do it again, I'm gonna be the one with technical difficulties. Oh shit.
All
Hey,
right, let
Paul,
me see if I can get it.
Paul did a great job of editing last time. So
Yes,
Oh,
thank you for that.
yo, dude. I
How do
was
I
in
do
my
it?
zone,
There we
bruh.
go.
I was in my zone, B.
yeah.
Is it letting you come on? Hold on. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, you should probably gonna come back on the all right, connected to audio. Booyaka. There it is.
Yay! Oh, I can't
Uh
wait. Let's bring in the yoga conversation because this is really actually quite cool.
hey,
Um,
so we're keeping both of these on right now?
no, I have the other one off. Do I have it off?
Hold on. Hold on, I'm gonna remove this. Okay, perfect, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, okay. All right, yo. Okay, B, before you go, I just want
Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
I
I want to
want
hear
to
it.
check in
Oh,
on
you
this
gotta go?
question.
Oh,
No, you
I
go,
want to
Caroline. I
check
want
in
to hear
on
what
this
you got to say.
because
no, I'm saying you have to leave.
no, no,
Some
no,
fuck.
no, no. I just wanted to because I
Oh,
want to hear
before he
Brian's
goes.
thoughts on
Yeah.
this because I think you, Brian, and you know have touched on this.
Yeah.
And Caroline, based on what you just said, I'm curious because when I first started teaching yoga, and even it's not as much now as when I first started teaching like 12
Mm.
years ago. But I remember people would be like, I would go to churches to talk about mindfulness and yoga. They'd be like, "Oh,
Yep.
that's the devil."
Yes.
Oh no, no, no! I'm not. Oh, you're not gonna have me meditate and see the Satan and whatnot. You heathen! You better get your.
Yes.
I mean, I heard it from different religions.
Yeah.
Then I've had people over the years as I've taught beginner courses. They say, especially I teach class on Sundays, they're like, "Yo, this was like church. You were
Mm-hmm.
saying a lot of stuff I hear in church." I was like, "Really? Like what?"
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I'm like, "Tell me."
Yeah.
Oh, you love? Everything is one? Oh, so I'm
Okay.
curious for you. What's been your experience as a yoga teacher,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you're going into when you go into spaces with people that are religious, like have you gotten any pushback or comments on that piece?
So 100%. So I mentioned that I worked as a physical therapist in
Mm-hmm.
a practice that was owned by born again Christians. And after my dark night of the soul, when I went back to work, I realized there was this disconnect in medicine. And so the first thing that I did was go to become a yoga teacher because I realized that people were needing something that we weren't providing in Western medicine. That was one of the things that blew me away. And I wanted to bring yoga, and they were like, no, like it was the devil's work. There was no talk of meditation. They wanted nothing to do with that. There was like an opportunity for like the devil to come in, which I found to be fascinating. I had no idea that there was this. But on the flip side of that, within like, because I grew up very Catholic and Christian, and you're talking about yoga and Hinduism and the like all the gods of Hinduism, or even Reiki, right? Which is totally non-denominational. It's just like source. I mean, that I was getting pushback from the Christian community. So I was in this space where it was like, well, let me just not say the word God. If I'm in spiritual circles, I won't say the word God. I'll just talk about source or the divine or whatever the word is. And then when
Divine is a
I
good
was in,
one.
right, the divine, and then when I was in Christian circles, I just wouldn't talk about what it was that I did, right? I just kind of didn't. I sort of hid. I hid in this in between space. And now what's happening is I feel like I'm being called to talk in this in between space to help people realize like we're talking about the same stuff. But one of the things that I find fascinating is that, you know, I went through a really hard year. And in particular, the last 8 months of the year were hard. We talked about it, I think, last time, where I literally wanted to die. I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I came back to yoga, right? And I realized had never really embraced all of yoga. If for those of you who don't know, there's these 8 limbs to yoga, and much of it is about being a good person. You know, there's like moral restraints and practices and going inward and
Yep.
but I realized that the Hindu gods and goddesses were actually very uncomfortable to me because I had been so conditioned to be Christian, and I saw them as like false gods. I didn't have an understanding of them. So I went to a kirtan in the summer on the beach, and, you know, you're chanting, and I was there with a friend. Like, I just like to sing. Like you said, it's very high vibrational. I know energy. And I was there with a friend who is Christian, and she said, "What are we chanting?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. It's all just high vibrational, right?" But there's one where you're like literally Hare Krishna, and we all have these images of Hare Krishnas, right? So I said to a friend who was very much into kirtan and lived in India for a while, I was like, how would you speak about this to someone that was Christian? And he said something to me that was profound that I realize now helped me to embrace the yogic practice. He said, it's all God, right? And he said, it's just different manifestations of God. In the same way, there's different manifestations of Jesus. There's Jesus, the teacher, Jesus, the healer, Jesus, the prophet, Jesus,
Baby
the one that
Jesus,
was angry. So they're
Black
like just
Jesus.
different manifestations of one God. It's all God. And so I had this level of comfort where when I returned to the yoga mat, I actually found God on the yoga mat. One, I get on the yoga mat and the voice of God said to me, "I love you, Carol Ann," on the yoga mat. And so I was like, whoa, this is all one. And then, as I mentioned, the Hanuman Chalisa is what shook things up and brought me to that in the shower. So for me, what's fascinating is I think the thing that brought me back around, the fact that it came through yoga and it came through like kirtan and it came through Hanuman and brought me to Jesus, was purposeful, because it was also to show me it's all one. And truthfully, one of the most powerful populations that I've worked with in my work as an energy healer is people who are in recovery, right? People are in recovery. So 12 steps. You are embracing the concept of God. But one of the things I love about them is they call it the God of your understanding. They're not telling you who God is or what God is, you know, the God of your understanding. And it's not what you believe God is. It's that you believe that there is. And when they've done studies on the people that do the best in recovery, it's the ones that truly embrace the concept of God. Because our body is responding to a belief that there is, that we are loved, that we are not alone, that there is something looking out for us, or whatever. And so it doesn't even matter what you believe it is. It just helps us to believe, right? And so I love that population because it expanded the definition of God and the value of that, right? The value of having a belief in something bigger than yourself. And I remember hearing from one of my like clients who's become a friend, and she said, you know, in their belief is God is either everywhere or nowhere. Everything is God. And Brian was saying that too. Everything is God, right? But also everything that's good and bad. It's all happening for us, right? We've talked about the labels of good and bad. It's like we grow sometimes from the things that are like the hardest things we could ever imagine. Well, that's God too. You know, the person that's
Yep.
giving you a hard
Yeah.
time, that's God too. It's like God
That's
moves
true.
through us as us, right?
This is all
That
true.
those are some of the most profound things that I learned through uh my own in my own new relationship with yoga, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's the reason why I asked and like what you were saying, because I think now people are understanding while there may be a distinction between religion and yoga,
yeah,
still the concepts are the same. You know, it's
yeah,
about like, caring for your body. Your body is a vessel of God. Like
yeah,
we were created in God's image. All right, so take care of your body, man. Breathe.
right,
Like the magic of breath, the magic of movement. Like that's one of the
yeah,
things I think people appreciate about yoga. Like, shoot, man, I still have people at the end of class crying.
yeah,
They're like, I just something spoke to me, and I just feel so good.
yeah,
That's okay. Listen, breathe. I'll hold space. That's a divine presence.
yeah,
And they're like, yeah,
yeah,
it's okay. I've done it many old times.
yep,
And I've done it in church too, man. I'm like, God damn, God.
yeah,
So like, so I
true.
get, listen, the thing, and it's all one. It may be a different type, but it's all one. B, I want to check in with you, man, because I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, do you think that religion, the container of religion allows spirituality to flourish and grow, man?
Yeah, I definitely think so in most religions. I think prepare for a little rain here, but I
Bless up,
think
let's go.
I think
Yeah,
we have many challenges today as humans, right? Human beings, specifically the human being we're being programmed. And one of the
Mhm.
problems is that monotheistic religions are ethnocentric religions, meaning that these religions are evaluating other people's culture, based on their standards of their own culture, right? Or they're judging. So
right,
when you have an ethnocentric religion, you have a God with his own rules and regulations.
mhm,
Which it's funny because ironically, by definition, does not make it a God. So like
right,
one of my favorite books is by Lao Tzu. It's called The Tao Te Ching.
Oh,
81 verses. Yeah, it's really good. Wayne Dyer actually did a reprint of it, which basically you put those verses and you kind of breaks it down in English, so to speak,
mhm.
and take it into like the 21st century. And so I was doing like one verse a day, and I did that book 3 times in a row. So I was trying to apply a lot of the things that Lao Tzu said. But anyway, his description of God is it's older than old, it's deeper than deep, it's darker than dark, it's older than God. So what is he saying? He's saying that God is what God is, you can't put a name on it.
mhm,
That was
Mm.
yeah,
pretty deep. That always stuck with me. And I think another problem is we have lost our understanding of the application of spirituality. So, like a simple definition for me is spirituality is connecting to a greater whole. So, as we
mhm,
grow in consciousness, for me at least, I realize very quickly if we're smart, boy, my ego isn't as reliable as I thought it was. So, whenever I'm
Mm.
making decisions stemming from my ego, the chances of me having relationship problems, financial problems, and just about everything else in the world is goes through the roof. It's much greater. So the first thing you need to do to come to realize is that what you think of yourself is susceptible to programming and trickery, and
Oof.
you need to figure it out. So how do you get beyond this? And that's kind of like where I kind of made a comment, like you got to take this hero's journey. So the first step is almost like realizing there's a crisis. Second of all, you realize that if you don't do something about your life, it's going to stay the same as it always been, which is pretty shitty, or you wouldn't be irritated enough to start the first step of the hero's journey to begin with, right?
Mm,
Then you
mm.
need to find a mentor. And right there, you can see like you're growing spiritually when you're looking for a mentor because you're going outside yourself. You're going outside the religion to get guidance from somebody else who has the skill and the wisdom to kind of help you through whatever it is you need to conquer on your hero's journey, which is first and foremost realizing who and what you are. That kind of
Mm.
makes sense a little bit.
Yeah,
yeah,
bro.
Yeah. So
Ooh,
as you go
bro.
on this, yeah. So as you go on,
Application of spirituality was where you got me. I was like, ooh,
yeah,
yeah,
ooh, wee.
yeah,
yeah,
Yes, bro.
yeah.
yeah.
And then
I
I mean,
love
yeah, go ahead.
I love that definition. So if you could repeat it when you talked about God is older than whatever, like you said,
Oh, deeper than
Yeah,
deep.
older than old. It's deeper than deep. It's darker than dark. It's older
right?
than God.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
that was
Let me
like
tell you,
that
bro.
really hit home when I heard that. I was like, all right, I can get
Love
with
that.
that.
I love that.
Yo, because
And I
especially
love
on
that.
Darker Than Dark, man, because I swear to
Yes.
goodness, I've seen something divine in the dark spaces I have been, and I'm like,
Yes.
wow, what are you doing down here?
Yeah.
Like, yo,
This? What is
yeah,
this?
man.
Definitely.
See, you gonna say something?
Yeah. I was gonna say I love this even from the standpoint, like when you talk about quantum physics, right? It was really, oh, sorry, this is my son.
It was like, boop.
He's like, I'm done.
Peace. I'm out. My son's here. Pew.
Yeah.
Yeah, she'll be back, peoples.
Yeah. But
yeah, go ahead, man.
I can keep going, man.
Yeah.
So like, So like after you go through this kind of like hero's journey, you realize you can talk to things by quieting your mind. You're connecting to them consciously. So what I'm trying to get at basically is like when we grow spiritually, we grow from an I-oriented perspective to a we-oriented perspective, which is me, my group of people, my friends, my fellow church members, or whatever it is. But then you mature into a world-centric or an all perspective because you come to the realization that your life can't be where it is without everybody, without the whole world. So if you can, basic examples, like if you look at your computer or you look at a car parts, like you break down your car or you break down your computer and you put them in all these pieces, each piece is made by somebody else in a different part of the world. So you realize that you need everyone in this world to make your life more efficient.
Yes.
So then you come to the realization that like, wow, I need everyone on this planet, and the healthier they are, happy they are, the better products will be made, the better relationships are, the better we care for each other, the better we can care for the world. So it's super powerful. And then like, I was kind of meditating on this and like, like while this process is going on, you might get the question like, who am I really? So you can start with your body and say like, what is my body? Well, it's organs, glands, and systems. What is that made of? Well, it's made of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins.
Right.
Well, where did that come from? Plants and animals. Where did that come from? The soil. That come from? So you can kind of keep going down this rabbit hole. Where did the soil come from? Well, some people think it came from the sun. Then you start looking a little bit further and you're like, wait a minute. If all the elements that make up everything on Earth were once in the sun, where did the sun come from? Then you find out black holes and suck up stars. They suck up park galaxies and whatever else they get a hold on for millions of miles around. And then you kind of come to this realization like, holy shit, who I am, who you are, Paul, took an entire universe to create. Your body and my body took an entire universe to create. So now you get your sense of spirituality reaches like the edges of the universe and what is behind the universe. Well, then you get kind of like to the Tao, or you get to the real God, or you get to pure potential, or whatever you want to call it. And then you realize, then you can really start actually going down the rabbit hole and study Sumerian tablets. Yeah, right.
Don't you start. That's another episode.
Yeah.
That's
or anything else, but everything comes back to the Kabbalion.
Yes.
Which is, as above, so below, your basic ancient alchemical principles. So whatever you do in the physical world will reflect itself in the spiritual world. Your thoughts create your external life. The Sufis, the Sufis. I read a lot about Sufism back in the day, and they used to say there is no God but God. I worship everything and everyone. So, man,
let me tell you, man. Oh my gosh, it's wild because when Caroline was talking about this before, the Kabbalion kept coming up, man, because these concepts when she was talking about right about black or white or what, it's like, yo, it's on the same spectrum. It's all the same. It's polarity. Like it's all on the spectrum, man. And
so basically put the cliff notes on your question. Can you I guess the question was like, does a religious person can become spiritual, I guess?
Yeah. Well, does the container of the religion, like the structure, the values of a religion, create this space for spirituality to grow?
I think religion, and it's not a knock on religion. I think, but religion, like when you have that ethnocentric religion where you start getting in judgments, or you start getting, you start putting yes or no, or you have a little bit of an ego behind it, it starts constricting you. We're not meant to be put in a box. We're not meant to be contained. And sooner or later, boom, like a crisis hits.
Yeah.
hero's journey. You kind of figure it out. You dissolve the ego a little bit, and then you realize. Then you start going into this I centric, to this we centric, to this all centric, and you realize that everyone on this planet, we're all connected. We need everyone's help. We
Yeah.
need everyone's help. To me, like, putting yourself in different religions, or like, Islam's versus whites, or whites versus blacks, or this and this. And we always have this like combative relationship. We're like dumb fucks, man. Like, we all need each other. It's so ridiculous when you look at it like that.
Yeah, dude, and that's the part that's saddened, which I've recognized it's had me judging religion when I see things that are happening in the world and wars that start over religion. When like looking at the actual religious beliefs, it's like you all are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, and I remember like I used to like, well, that was one of the things when I was growing up as a Jehovah's Witness and going from door to door. And actually like if every like once in like 7 years someone would actually answer the door and like have a conversation, it was like, oh, junk. And as I got older, it wasn't about like, hey, you want to take this watchtower, me talking at them. It was me having a conversation with them. So it was
Mhm.
more like, well, we don't believe that. I'm like, oh, I'm interested. Like, okay, well, my Bible says this, and this is my thought and belief around it. Like, what is yours saying? What's your belief around it? And it wasn't confrontational. It was more for an understanding. So even it wasn't about me trying to convert, right? And I think that's the piece where religion can be very slippery when the ego can come into play. And now instead of listening and hearing you and come from that place of we are all one, we may
Yeah.
say the language may be different. I could come from a place of like I'm trying to convince you, or I'm trying to convict you because, or convince you to come to my side, or I'm looking to convict you because you're failing, you're resistant to come to my side.
Yeah.
And that's where it can be like I realized that's where a lot of my judgments came from, even though the structure of religion for me like really kind of it gave me the foundation to be like, you know what, like you mentioned, the crisis is like
Mhm.
that shit doesn't feel right for me, man.
Yeah. I
How,
read a
how
couple. Yeah, I read a couple Deepak Chopra. Like, I wasn't really big into religion growing up. Um, the Bible, I think there's like, obviously, unless you got like one brain cell, you realize that the Bible's not literal. you know, you know.
Bible before basic instructions before leaving Earth.
Yeah. So, but
You
a
know?
lot of like Deepak Chopra stuff and other kind of spiritual gurus, and they take passages from the Bible, and
Mhm.
they basically break it down to what they think Jesus really meant. And there's a
Ooh.
lot of like interesting stuff in there, you know? And it's like, I remember, I forgot where I learned this before. They're like, oh, the burning, like there's, I guess, there's a passage of the
Burning
Bible with
bush.
the burning bush where, like, I forgot who the guy who's like, started seeing Jesus, but he's like, and somebody like a historian was like, all that wood that they used to build Noah's Ark and that burning bush in that area was something from the acacia tree. The acacia tree is one of the most potent plants that has DMT in it.
Oh,
So he was
there it
burning
is,
that
bro.
shit
That shit may have
like
been a
he was
journey,
seeing God.
brother.
So
Brother.
I'm laughing at it. I'm like, you imagine like, Noah's like, I'm gonna make a rowboat, I just want to get across this Red Sea or whatever like that. And he's like
It's like,
cooking dinner for his family. Next thing you know, he's like fucking he built like, this Titanic.
yo, be
He's
like,
like,
I thought you were building a rowboat. Yo, man, I was burning
oh,
this tree.
no, this
All of a
DMT is
sudden I got
rich.
inspired. It's like, yo,
He's
man,
building
what?
a cruise ship, Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
see, but like this is what I'm talking about, right? Where I think it's both end, right? Because the like one of the things we had as Jehovah's Witnesses, we had something called My Book of Bible Stories, right? So
Mhm.
there were these stories based on the actual passages in the Bible. And like looking back on it, like talking about the burning bush and the burning tree, like, and then like knowing like, oh man, that was a hallucinogen. A lot of these things that these people went through, they were on some sort of hallucinogen, right?
Yeah.
Like there's like when you look at the history, especially I'm a big fan of this guy, Billy Carson. So he's like a researcher. He's an intellectual, but he's just like, you know, he just wants people to know the truth. So when I listened to him and then did my own research, I'm realizing like, wow, there was a lot of the stuff in there. There was like a basis for this, and like really taking a step back outside of even my concept of what I think it is. Like, I'm gonna get a whole new understanding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even like looking at the concepts of Jesus and then learning about like hermeticism, right?
Yeah.
And frequencies. I'm like, yo, what if Jesus was able to, he learned how to manipulate frequency so he could become the frequency to walk on water, to
Yeah.
multiply. I mean, like, anyway, yeah,
What's
that's
interesting,
for
like
another episode.
you ever listen to Bill Maher?
Yes,
So
yes.
he's big on like, the whole thing is just like, a fairy tale story, but he makes some good, interesting points. He's like the whole thing with Jesus, like he could have existed. I have no idea. But around that time, or whenever a couple hundred thousand years, they literally had around the Mediterranean area, they had 18 different Jesuses around there.
Mm,
All these stories they had, their 12 disciples. The guy got crucified to next to two bad guys on the crosses.
right.
He walked on water. They all had their birthday on December 24th, which
Mm,
which the reason it was on the 24th is because that was the next day was the beginning of the getting days started getting longer. So they celebrated that. But he's like there was many Jesuses out there the
right.
same. It was just a story, it was just a myth. And what made Jesus's name kind of stick was because he grew up around the Roman times. And at the time, like 60% of people were slaves. But the only thing he did different was he promised the people that there was an afterlife, and that's what kind of caught on Christianity. So, I mean, whether you
Wow,
believe it or not, it's just interesting to think about, you know.
that is some
But
funky.
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. So you don't know really what's what and everything like that, and I don't know. I don't
Dude,
know.
that is some interesting.
Yeah, you got
Yo,
to watch Bill Maher on that. I mean, he's not the end all
why?
be all when it comes to like the origins of Christianity, but what I like about he makes sense with a lot of things he says, and if you do your research behind it backs up a lot of it. But
I think actually, I'm like, how the heck do we even wrap this up? Because there's a lot of stuff that we talked about.
yeah,
Um, there was a lot of stuff that we talked about that I think is important for people to know. And when it comes down to it, it's all good and it's all the same whether you're religious or spiritual.
yeah,
The question is, does it work for you?
that's what I was gonna get at. Doesn't matter what you believe in, what you practice. Does it work for you? Are you happy? You can believe in Jesus. You can believe in spirituality. You can believe in unicorns. It doesn't matter. It doesn't
Listen,
matter. It's a fun discussion to have. You know,
it really is, man.
a fun
And I
discussion
think
to have.
I think I'm appreciating what all three of us did in this session because it gives us an opportunity to model what it's like to have conversation, regardless of the differences. Like all of us grew up with different backgrounds, yet at the same time, we all went through our experiences. And I think it's important for us to recognize that, listen, we all go through experiences. And in this, in this, please remember that whether someone's spiritual or religious, it's all good.
Mm.
It's all love. It's all one. And I encourage people that listen, as you meet other people that are of different religions, we want to invite you, Bree. I'm gonna speak for you. I'm gonna speak for you because I think you'll agree with what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
We want to invite you to have conversations rather than put your dukes up like this is what my religion does, you bully, or like whatever. Listen to what they're saying. Ask what they believe in. Ask how they got into this. Ask how what this means to them, and share the same for you. Like, what are the core concepts? Because I can guarantee if you're able to open yourself up in that way and be curious, you're gonna find something similar or same thread, same belief, same passion as the person that's across from you that may be religious or spiritual or a different religion. Please be aware of that. All right. So, B, any last words, man, before
You summed that up beautifully, man. That was good.
Thank you, bro.
That was
Thank you.
good.
Yeah, I feel this one, man, because like I think it's so important. I think some people can make religion a divide, a distraction.
And if that's the case, your religion isn't working for you.
It's not working for you, man.
Yeah, like we mentioned this before. Everything comes from two emotions: love or fear. If you're trying to divide, or you're trying to separate, or you're trying to judge, that's coming from a place of fear, and that religion isn't a good foundation. Be open, you know, be forthcoming,
Yeah.
allow the love and chi to flow, man.
Let it
We're,
flow.
we're all go. We're all leaving this planet. We're all going to the same place.
Yup.
So,
Yup, bro.
whether
Ain't
you
that
like it or
the
not,
truth?
we're all going to the same place afterwards. We're gonna have to deal with each other eventually.
Yep. Yep. And so it is, and so it is, and so
You
it
know?
is. Bless up to everybody for paying attention.
Yeah.
Bless up for our guest. It's unfortunate, like I think it was my thing. I think when she came in on the two phones, and then like I deleted it. I removed one, so now it's saying the host removed you, so I can't get in. So
I don't want to say
I
anything, but I
want
knew it was your fault.
yeah, it was. It's damn, Paul. I'm gonna go pray now. So look, thank you everybody. Thank you everybody for checking in, man. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for talking about it. It means the world to us. It really does. Thank you so much. Write down comments, share your experiences of your religion and spirit and your take. And listen, like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe. Let's go. Let's go. Peace out, everybody. Peace.
Appreciate you all. Thank you.